423. Everyone has cast their vote. We'll close the roll. That is now stricken. Okay, now, Delegate Price, you have HB 422.
Yes, and I would like 2 line amendments, and I apologize. They're really short.
All right.
On line 35, if we could add between Norfolk and Richmond, add Portsmouth. And on line 43, instead of $125,000, if we could add $150,000.
So I will resist the idea to amend and include Alexandria as well. I will resist. I thought.
I appreciate it.
I will
We only
resist
have 150
that.
in the budget.
Is there a motion to accept these 2 amendments on block?
So moved.
All right, let's vote on the amendments. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, your amendments are part of the bill.
Perfect. So this is really, really brief. Congressman Scott has championed the Youth Promise Act, and it has passed the House and Senate in Washington, but it has not been appropriated. And part of the Youth Promise Act is a community assessment. Sometimes communities do gun violence prevention programs without doing an actual assessment. So I'll give you the example of Newport News. We have amazing programs in our Parks and Recreation Department. We have amazing private programs, but they're being held in areas of the city where the students that need them don't have transportation, or they don't have money in their budget to promote them. So these activities that are taxpayer funded are actually not being as efficient as possible, as well as soon to be, maybe, possibly, with the ability for localities to have regulations dealing with gun violence prevention. There's also a needs assessment that's involved. And so it's basically a community-based needs assessment of the resources of the community. So you put together this coordinating council, and it has stakeholders and a really big part of community input. And so what we did was we found areas that were experiencing gun violence at a higher rate that we wanted to do these community assessments for. They cost about $25,000, and we would like it for those 5 localities. Excuse me.
Delegate Price, if I may?
Sure.
Where does the money come from?
The money is coming from the general fund in the budget. It is in the introduced budget.
It is in the governor's introduced
It is
budget.
in the governor's introduced budget.
Wow, you are good friends with the governor.
Really, Mark?
Would people like to speak on behalf of HB 422, please come forward. Would anyone speaking in opposition to HB 422 please come forward? Are there questions of others on the subcommittee, the patrons?
Second.
No questions? Oh yeah, I think there's a question. Doug King.
I was curious why you picked certain locations to go along with what you said about Alexandria, because we're talking about gang violence, not gun violence, but gangs.
We are.
And the gangs that, we have gangs in little communities where I'm from. So if you're going after gang violence, then you kind of need to look at the state.
Delegate Price.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would say to the delegate that I know that this budget came with constraints. And I would like to do 2 million, 3 million, 10 million, but I knew that that was not a reasonable request based on how the budget was going. This is not the last action that I will take. It's just there are higher rates of youth gang and gun violence in these localities that we've chosen. It's not to say that these are the only localities where this is happening, but also these are areas where the mayors or city council or city manager have requested such. So this would help them get what they have sought.
Perhaps, Campbell, you can come back next year and
With your own
add your own community to this list. Any other questions for the patron? Do I hear a motion?
Second.
All right, there's been a motion to report and a second. Will clerk please open the roll? Clerk, please close the roll, and your bill reports 6-0.
Oh, I believe, I'm sorry.
With
Mr.
amendments.
Chairman, I believe that it has to be reported and referred with amendments.
I thought because it was in the budget,
It does have fiscal.
it still has to, it still has a fiscal impact? I apologize. All right, let's strike that roll. Let's start over. Do I have another motion, a different motion, to report and refer?
Report and refer to appropriations, Mr. Chairman. With
Second.
amendments.
All right, I apologize, I thought the money was in the budget. Maybe it still goes to refer. Let's open the roll to report and refer to appropriation. With amendments. Trying to move fast. try this again. And close the roll, please. The bill reported and refers with amendments 6-0. Thank you,
Mr.
Delegate.
Chairman and committee.
All right. Let's see what you want to do.
I see.
All right, Delegate Miyares, come on.
This is an easy one, Chair.
I recognize that. That's why I invited you.
Hopefully.
Let's see. Tell us about HB 65.
Yes, so this establishes a Virginia Missing Child with Autism Alert Program, creates a program for local, regional, statewide notifications of a missing child with autism, that their whereabouts are known, so if they're diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, who's 17 years or younger. And part of what we run into is if you do a lot of work in the autism community, someone who's on the spectrum, oftentimes if you go up to them and ask, are you lost, they will not even register that they are missing. There was a tragic incident up in the DC area of I think it was, they were 12, they wandered off at a birthday party, and they luckily, blessedly found the child 48 hours later. It was a major news story up there, and so that's the background of this, and I've talked to a lot of different autism groups that have an interest in it,
So Delegate, basically what this does is it takes the existing Virginia Missing Child program and it has specialized alerts if the child has
right, in
autism.
which they'll be able to alert people that there's a missing child with autism. So again, it informs the good citizens and quite frankly law enforcement as well. You're gonna have to maybe approach it in a little bit different manner than say their missing child. Do you know where your mommy or daddy is? Do you know, are you lost? It kind of educates a little bit the best way to approach it.
All right, anyone have questions for the patrons on the subcommittee?
I do.
Delegate Cameron.
I'm curious, things we're doing with autism here, why did we stop at 17? Why didn't we go to 21?
Delegate
As
Myers.
I've said, maybe people heard this before, I apologize, but when I was a rookie delegate, a wise person said broad bills die and narrow bills survive. So when possible, I like to try to do narrow bills, and maybe future legislators can decide to expand it, but that's why it's limited to what it is.
Delegate Simons.
So I was contacted by somebody who was promoting an Andre alert for for older adults who have disabilities. Is that at all related to this bill?
Delegate Myers.
No, that is not. This is right now limited to just those that are on the autism spectrum. So it's not I'm not quite sure what an Andre alert is.
Delegate Simons.
Oh, it was suggested to me by a constituent, and I thought there might be a bill about it, so. But we haven't
I'm
seen
not
it.
aware of one, but
Okay.
Let's see if there's some folks in the audience who want to speak on behalf of HB 65.
Mr. Chairman, good evening. Randy Pierce on behalf of Autism Speaks. We want to thank the patron for supporting the bill and the bill act favorably upon the bill.
Thank you. Anyone else speaking in favor of HB 65? Anyone speaking in opposition to HB 65? Anyone else on the subcommittee have any more comments or questions? Delegate
Chair, I
Cole.
report to move.
Move to report? Your report's to move. All right, let's open the roll. We can close the roll. Delegate, your very good bill reports unanimously.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, Delegate Freitas, come on. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't see. Well, their bill, this bill's more complicated. That's why it goes with Delegate Scott's bill, so I think the two of them probably should go together. Let's do Delegate Adams. I
Thank you.
apologize. I did not see you.
I appreciate it.
Oh, Delegate Scott's bill, Delegate Campbell's bill on the same subject.
Are you going to make these people come back next week?
No, but I'm hoping Delegate Scott can make it. Go ahead, Delegate. Delegate Adams.
Good evening, members of the committee, Mr. Chair. I have two bills before you this evening. The first, if we could take.
Your choice.
All right, how about HB 1076?
HB 1076. The Slingbo bill.
it is. So, what I wanna show the committee is that this in here is a slingshot, something you might find on a 10-year-old. And, this next picture, I can work my operating system here. Come on. This picture here is an example of a sling bow. I don't know if you can see that.
Maybe blow it up a
It's,
little bit for us.
trying to, there you go. And there are various variations of that. And in our current code, under the concealed weapon statute, we have a number of weapons, one of which is listed as a slingshot. When it is likely, and in other parts of the code, meant to read sling bow. You know, I have jokingly said that I've put in 10-year-old kid legislation because of the spitting and swearing and now a slingshot. But these are all pretextual problems, and what that means is that they're minor infractions of our current code that ultimately result in case building for people, especially young people of color. And this in particular just seemed more of an error in our code. Additionally, if you look further in this, and it has pretty stiff penalties, and they go from a class 1 misdemeanor to felony if they occur more than once. But if you go even further, the last line of the code, the other thing this would do besides change sling shot to sling bow is so nobody can have these except people in the Department of Corrections and then the harbor master for the city of Hopewell. The harbor master for the city of Hopewell is not a real position anymore. It's a sort of a long-standing vestige, but so that doesn't apply, although he sounds like he's pretty tough.
Delegate, what does a sling bow do? What does it shoot out? How?
So it's almost like a mini, it looks to me, and I'm not a hunter, but it has, some of them have darts.
Looks like an arrow with a knife.
Or there's this is another copy of a sling bow. So, I mean, clearly, you know, how you characterize a slingshot is a forked stick with an elastic band. These are very different items. And so, this is a pretty simple bill, but it just seeks to, if we're gonna have, serious, you know, misdemeanor and felony, and cumulative felony charges that apply, we should at least have, weapons, for lack of a better word, that sort of, should bear that full weight of the law.
That's quite dangerous. All right, the folks on the committee have a question for the patron. Is there someone here in the audience that wants to come and support HB 1076? Is there anyone in the audience that opposes House Bill 1076? Last chance for folks on the committee to ask the question or make a comment. Delegate Cole.
Mr. Chair, I move to report.
Yeah, right here. I heard a motion.
Second.
Here's second. All right. Will the clerk please open the roll? Close the roll, please. And the bill reports 7-0.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. The next bill I have before you is House Bill 1651. And this bill specifically looks to address the proliferation of hepatitis C in our prisons. Hepatitis C is a bloodborne contagious illness that causes extensive, left untreated, causes extensive liver damage, the complications of liver damage, and subsequently death. It is actually a curable disease, but that cure can be very costly. To date, it is estimated there are 5,000 inmates in Virginia's prisons with hepatitis C. And in March of 2019, Virginia made the decision to test all inmates 4 for hepatitis C. What's unusual about that is, you know, in general, when we're in the medical community and we're testing for something, it's with the purpose of treatment. But the cost of treatment has been such that very few people have actually been treated, less than 50 in the last year. And so in doing some exploration of how we could address this, there was a model out of Louisiana, and Louisiana, like Virginia, gets federal subsidy for lowest priced medications. And they were able to use a model that was sort of based off of the Netflix subscription model, such that if I have a Netflix subscription and Delegate Robinson has a Netflix subscription, and I watch 100 hours of TV a month and she watches 2, we still pay $9.99. So the pricing model is similar to that structure. And Louisiana was able to decrease the cost of that care by about 60% over the first year. The thing about hepatitis C, and if you can really look towards a goal of eradication, is that the cost will get lower theoretically over time because you have less people reinfecting. And so that's the general rationale for the bill. What the bill actually does would direct the Department of Corrections to put out a request for proposals for pharmaceutical manufacturers for the purpose of unrestricted 5-year supply of hepatitis C and a viral medication and any necessary ancillary services at an annual fixed rate to be administered as necessary to inmates confined in state correctional facilities. And the cost of such subscription-based agreement shall not exceed the amount spent by the department on hepatitis C treatment during the previous fiscal year. The department shall report to the governor and the General Assembly by November 30th of 2020, and by November 30th each year after the contract regarding the status of the contract and whether the contract has lowered the department's hepatitis C treatment costs and the inmate health outcomes resulting from the contract.
Thank you, Delegate. Is there someone here at the Department of Corrections?
Yes.
Is this something that you could do, sir?
Do you have a question or?
Yes, my question is, if the Department of Corrections is directed to issue a request for proposals to purchase an unrestricted 5-year supply of hepatitis C, as you heard.
Yes,
that's
we
sort
could
of-
do that, and the only, we wanted to make sure the language didn't lock us in any way, that we could treat more people the following years. That was the only thing that we had a concern, maybe the language might lock us in. But as long as we have control over, because we're familiar with some of these contracts that were not necessarily as favorable for the state, but I think in the way that it's written now, it gives us the ability to put in conditions. So it would be a welcome change for us.
Is that correct, Delegate? It gives them that flexibility?
As that's how it's intended.
Okay. All right. Anyone here speaking in favor of HB 1651?
I will speak. My name is Allison McFarland. I'm from the Roanoke area, Pontotoc County area of Virginia. I personally know an inmate that was released this past November, and she was one of the ones that received that treatment, and she is now free of Hep C, and her liver scans and her fatty liver tissues have increased her health, and she is now in a halfway house in the guest house here in Richmond, and I think that it is a wonderful, wonderful
Fantastic.
opportunity.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else here speaking in favor of HB 1651?
I'm Lauren Penn from Bassett, Virginia. I will stand in favor of this bill. I feel every inmate should be able to have access to any kind of medication that they may have.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else?
My name is Richard Walker, and I'm formerly incarcerated individual as well as being recovered from Hep C. And I'm sure this bill will help reduce some of the costs in the Department of Correction, that more individuals will be able to be treated.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else? Sir, you support this bill?
Mr. Chairman, my name is Hunter Jamerson. I represent Gilead Sciences. We're the manufacturer of Harvoni and Epclusa, which are cures to hepatitis C. We want to applaud Delegate Adams for bringing this bill to your attention. I think she has identified that Virginia is a leader in its correction system in screening for hepatitis C, and she has also identified that there are, in fact, innovative payment models available which can allow us to bring cures to Virginia to treat many, many more and hopefully all incarcerated individuals with hepatitis C. Our request of Delegate and I'll make the request to the subcommittee, is that the way we've succeeded in Louisiana in accomplishing a contract for a subscription model is through executive action and working closely with their departments in Louisiana's Medicaid and in corrections. And we make the same request here in Virginia, which is I think we'll have a more successful procurement and more successful contract if we're able to work directly through the Department of Corrections by letter of this committee through budget language in the Appropriations Act. I see the chairman here, and we are committed to working with Delegate Adams on her accompanying budget amendment and appropriations staff to accomplish that, or by letter to the department. It creates challenges in procurement if we legislate and codify the terms of that procurement. There are complexities in hepatitis C contracting, particularly with how Virginia delivers its care. Virginia does not have a simple system. We have a combination of private providers and 340B providers through the VCU health system. These are complexities we can best accomplish through budget language or administrative action by letter. And our request is that the bill be laid on the table with a letter to the Department of Corrections and that we advocate for instructive budget
Let
language.
me see what the delegate patron wants to do. Delegate?
At the end of the day, what I really care about is that patients are cared for, and that when we can cure, there are very few illnesses that we can cure. So if we can bring a cure to people and really sort of stop the proliferation of hepatitis C infection, I am all for whatever makes that successful, and I'm completely agreeable with laying this bill on the table and not codifying or going in that direction with the promise that we'll get this done, because that's what's the most important.
Delegate Simons?
Mr. Chairman, I feel like this is a rather expensive medication. I don't know if there's any guarantee that it's gonna get done unless we do this through legislation. I mean, I support this bill. I'm not sure we should lay it on the table.
Delegate Campbell?
It's in the governor's budget, unless I'm incorrect.
Delegate Adams, is this in the governor's budget?
There was already established funds for hepatitis C. I did put in a budget amendment for this particular bill.
Delegate Adams, what's your preference? You would prefer that we refer this? And then if it does not achieve appropriations, then send a letter?
Would you be able to speak to how the costs, or how it works, and how it
I'll tell you what, Delegate Adams, why don't we do this? It sounds like the two of you need to confer.
No, I'm good with it. I was trying to answer the members of the committee with some more concrete information.
Actually, the chair of appropriations is right here.
Yes, sir.
Actually, Mr. Chairman, good evening. In order to move the process along, I would hope that you would entertain, since it's in the governor's budget, I would hope that you would entertain a motion to pass and refer to appropriations.
All right, that sounds pretty good to me. Is there such a motion?
So moved.
And second.
All right, so the motion's been made to report, excuse me, is there anyone that opposes HB 1651? I'll give everyone a chance to speak. All right, there's been a motion made to report and refer to appropriation. Open the roll, please, yes. All right, that is a 6-0 vote. Thank you very much, Danica. If you two still want to talk, you're welcome to, and we'll see where we go. Let's get, actually, Delegate Mullen, you just simply want to strike a bill, is that all you want?
Yes, I have HB 665.
Yes.
At the request of leadership, I'm asking that this be stricken. We are going to have an extensive crime commission study on this issue over the course of the next year.
I have HB 782, is that the one you're referring to?
I apologize, I have a different bill
No
folder in
problem.
my hand.
All right,
Yes.
there's been, the patron has asked that we strike HB 782. The clerk, please open the roll. Your bill has been stricken.
Thank you. I imagine we'll be back next year with a much bigger bill.
All right, Delegate Torian, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The committee is here in regards to HB 1250.
All right, tell us about HB 1250, please.
Mr. Chairman and committee, HB 1250 is the Community Policing Act. It's a data collecting and reporting requirement. And just to give you a brief overview of the legislation, in the practice of policing, bias-based profiling, unwarranted property searches, and the use of excessive force are serious concerns the Community Policing Act will deter and increase accountability for this mission in Chicago, creating a comprehensive database of the basis and outcome of every officer's traffic stop. And let me share with you as I give this overview that we work very hard within all of our communities to ensure that all of our citizens are safe and that everyone is treated fairly. And what this database is going to do is to ensure that our officers are protected in their stops and that citizens are being received and addressed properly as well. So what this bill does, it requires the Department of State Police is directed to use the database to collect and analyze motor vehicles and investigatory stops and record and the records of complaints alleging the use of excessive force. The data analysis shall be used to determine the existence and prevalence of practice of bias-based profiling and complaints alleging excessive force. Specifically, this is what the bill requires. It requires that each time a local law enforcement officer or state police officer stops a driver of a motor vehicle, the officer collects the following data: the racial ethnicity, the age and gender of the person stopped, the reason for the stop, the location of the stop, and whether a warning, written citation, or summons was issued or whether any person was arrested. If any of the former occurred, the warning provided or the crime or violation charged, and whether the vehicle or any person were searched. It is a safeguard for not only our law enforcement, but for the citizens who are stopped as well. And it's simply the process of collecting data and improving our law enforcement efforts and service to the community. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Are there folks here to speak on behalf of HB 1250? Is there anyone here in opposition to HB 1250? Mr. Rudd.
Mr. Chairman, Dana Schreiber with the Virginia Association of Chiefs of Police. It's not, I wouldn't call it necessarily opposition, but Delegate Guzman also has a data collection bill that she very graciously allowed to go to the Crime Commission. And the difference here is that we aren't taking into consideration input from local law enforcement. This would be an administrative construct where state police would put this database together. It calls for them to work with a university, but it doesn't call for input from local law enforcement. It also leaves out a lot of law enforcement agencies. State and local law enforcement, that terminology does not include all of our law enforcement agencies in Virginia. For example, you've completely left out police authorities in multi-jurisdictional authorities, campus police, etc. There's an opportunity here to do this correctly, but we would graciously ask the delegate to send this one also to the Crime Commission so that, along with Delegate Guzman's bill, can be done in concert. Because with the Crime Commission, you also have an opportunity for public hearings. And we would like to get not only the input from the public, but also input from our law enforcement community. So that would be our request on this bill. The bill does not take into consideration the cost to local law enforcement. As you know, you may get a fiscal impact statement from state police, but we can't begin to tell you what this costs localities. One locality is Suffolk Police Department, for example, estimated that initial costs for them are $70,000. Now, in the appropriations bill right now, 599 funding for police departments is flatlined. There is no improvement in 599 funding at this point in time. So we really think that the best way for this to be done in conjunction with Delegate Guzman's bill is for it to go to the Crime Commission for studies so that we can make sure that we cover all the indicators.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Others in opposition? Anyone else in opposition?
I was just going to speak to the unfunded mandate.
It's an unfunded mandate for localities.
Absolutely.
Okay. Delegate Troy, you want to address some of those criticisms?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I would like to address it. One of the things that concerns me is when we see legislation that is going to be presented, all the parties involved and that are concerned, I have an open door. They can come see me and voice their concerns in regards to my legislation. They don't have to wait until we come to a hearing and then stand in opposition when they know that the legislation is going to be on the docket. We've already talked to state police, so we've talked with some stakeholders. My door is open. They can come and talk to me about their concerns. They don't have to wait till we come to subcommittee.
Delegate Troy, and what about the complaint that it's an unfunded mandate for local law enforcement?
It probably is an unfunded mandate for local authorities, and we always take those matters into account. Unfunded mandates are not uncommon to any of us in state and local governments, Mr. Chairman.
Do other folks have questions? Delegate Simons.
Mr. Chairman, don't the police already capture a lot of this data on a routine basis? I mean, really, how heavy of a lift
Delegate
would
Torrey?
this be?
This process, Delegate, would improve, and we always work on improving policing within our communities, and this is just another tool to make sure that that's done.
Other questions for the patron?
I have a comment.
Delegate Campbell.
I think the best thing we could do would be keep the annual inspection program in place if you're concerned about citizens getting stopped. To me, this is another form that a police officer has to fill out, he has to keep track of. And I do not believe, because of court rulings, that there's any police department out there that is profiled. I honestly do not believe that.
Other comments or questions from the subcommittee? Delegate Torrey, you certainly get the last word.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We would be naive to think that there is no police profiling in the Commonwealth of Virginia. I don't think any law enforcement, whether it's local or state, would be opposed to us doing the very best that we can to ensure that citizens who are being stopped, who are being searched, that they are being treated properly. I just don't believe that would happen. Any tool that we can present as a General Assembly to our communities to ensure the safety and professionalism of not only law enforcement, but the adequate behavior of our citizens as well, that information is very useful. And this is to enhance the work that our law enforcement do, and also to ensure our citizens that when they're being stopped and searched, that they're going to be treated fairly, and there's a record of that as well.
Yeah, Delegate Flowers.
My biggest concern, Chairman Torian, is the fiscal impact on the locals. I'm not disputing whether we should look at all these things, but I'm wondering, do we send it to the Crime Commission so we can get a better idea even of the cost? Because, I mean, we have an estimate of local FIS, and it's, goes from 0 to $1.25 million, which is a big number. And I think that was Virginia Beach put that number in, that it would cost them to implement this. So that's my biggest concern through this whole process. And I don't doubt that maybe collecting the data isn't a good idea, so we can really look at what's happening at all. I don't doubt that, but I am concerned about the local costs.
Delegate Cole, you had a comment? I'm sorry, Delegate Torrey, you want to address?
Yes, I do. Mr. Chairman, if the committee looks favorably upon this legislation, it would be reported and referred to appropriations.
Yes. I don't know if Delegate Torrey, you wanted to address Delegate Robinson's comment about local cost impact.
Upstairs, we do a whole lot to deal with local communities and resources that they're in need of, and we certainly will be sensitive to the costs associated to localities as well. Certainly will be looked at by appropriations.
All right. Any other comments or questions? Is it a comment?
Comment.
Go ahead, Delegate.
So I just want to make a statement in regards to my venerable colleagues about profiling in Virginia. And I think it's very key for us to understand, just because we don't experience certain things doesn't mean it's not going on elsewhere. And so with that in mind, I do trust the leadership and competence of the chairman on the 13th floor, so I would move to report and refer to appropriations.
Second. All right, there's been a motion second to report and refer HB 1250. Will the clerk please open the roll? Should we do it by roll or? There we go. Delegate Troyan, your bill reports by a vote of 4 to 3. Report referred appropriation.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, committee.
All right, there are two bills that are similar one to the other. There's Delegate Campbell's 1370 and Delegate Scott's 1532. I don't know if you.
They're a little different.
Well, they're definitely different. They deal with the same subject matter. I can see they're very different. All right, Delegate Campbell, let's talk about HB 1370.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my bill is obviously decidedly more narrow than I think Delegate Scott's bill is. What my bill simply would do is provide that nonviolent offenders would be eligible to receive up to 10.5 sentence credits per month. I think currently under current law, similar to violent felons, they can only earn up to 4 credits per month. Let me say this. You know, I think it's, I'm encouraged because I've been practicing criminal defense for 20 years in this state. And I think it's fair to say that we're taking a more forward-looking approach now at utilizing alternatives to incarceration as a means of punishment. Right now, I think we've got about 30,000 people in this state that are incarcerated, and it costs us about $1.3 billion a year, and that's just in the Department of Corrections. We've got a very similar figure actually held in the local jails across the state as well, at an enormous cost for localities and for the state for that matter. So certainly this would provide a cost savings to the state. In addition to that, it's important to note that, and I couldn't find these figures, but I know from experience that a large majority of the nonviolent offenders that have been held in jail are drug offenders, quite frankly. They're people that have had multiple drug possession charges over time. They've accumulated points on the sentencing guidelines that have caused them to end up getting a sentence in excess of 1 year. And that's obviously, we've spent a lot of money, a lot of resources and time in the last couple of years trying to address the drug problems in communities. Unfortunately, those people that are sitting in jail haven't gotten the benefit of that. I think that this would provide a carrot. It's obviously not a get out of jail free card. The divisions in the law would still remain that the offender would have to be compliant with all the jail rules, would have to participate in any recommended programs and successfully complete that to earn the sentence credits. But I think it's high time that we differentiate violent offenders from nonviolent offenders in the system.
I actually have a question for counsel. I'd like to ask counsel, Delegate Campbell's bill 1370 gives 10.5 sentence credits for every 30 days served on a nonviolent felony. Delegate Scott's bill is definitely a more extensive bill that can have up to 30 days, and we'll talk about his bill when we talk about it. But it definitely provides a very different system. Of course, a bill can come out of subcommittee and can go further and can die and can do all kinds of things. If today this subcommittee were to pass both bills, is that something that is conceivable that we could do, even if they conflict with each other?
I will say, I've been told that the courts committee also wants to take a look at this bill as well. And so if you wanted to support this policy, to your point, the proper motion would be report and refer to courts, because there's other bills sitting there and they'd like to take a look at it. And so at least in that instance,
we could do both bills if we wanted to.
They need to go in the same direction.
All right, so
Mr. Chairman,
yes.
Could we not just vote to refer to courts?
I believe that we are not allowed to simply refer to another committee without a speaker's letter. So it would have to be reported and referred. I think
You could do that if you did not want to act on the policy.
I mean, we have a lot of people here, I think, who want to talk about it. So, I don't know if something else we can agree with, but I accept that we should refer to courts even if we report. So, why don't we continue the conversation? I just wanted to know, we could report both bills out if we wanted to. Not saying we will. Delegate Campbell, do you have more to say on your bill? All right. I know there are a lot of people in the audience. Before we get to them, is there any brief discussion of subcommittee, or can we get right to the audience? Let's go right to them. Many people have been waiting. Yes, we do have to limit the time because there's a lot of you in this room. So I'll tell you what, if you will line up there, we will hear testimony for, what time is it? Let's hear 5 minutes. Yeah, let's hear 5 minutes for and 5 minutes against, and then I will definitely give everyone a chance to raise their hands and let us know what they think of each bill. We will be doing, after this Delegate Scott's bill, So, if you support both bills, I'd ask you to speak on one and not the other, just so we hear more voices. All right, please, go ahead.
So my name is Jen Carter, and I am co-founder of the Humanization Project. Thank you all for letting me speak today. I'm not speaking either for or against this bill. I am speaking for Delegate Scott's bill. I think this bill would be great for people behind bars, but I don't think that it does enough. I think that we know that 63% of people behind bars are there for violent offenses, and those are exactly the people that we need to give incentive to be better people. 95% of people behind bars are going to get out in the end, whether they've been rehabilitated or not. So it's important for them to have the incentive as well.
Thank you so much. Go ahead, sir.
Richard Walker.
By the way, let me just say, if you want to speak on either bill, I think that's okay, and we'll also allow it in Delegate Scott's time if you want to speak on either bill.
Sounds good.
Save time.
Richard Walker, and I applaud that same gesture that she just made. You know, this is a step toward, but it needs to go further. I'm a formerly incarcerated convicted felon. I spent 85% of the time incarcerated. I was a nonviolent offender, drug charges, okay? It's high time that we stop being the Department of Containment as opposed to the Department of Correction. People need to get the credit for what they're doing and being corrected in their behaviors, and they are ready to come home. I went and met with the delegate that struck the geriatric conditions bill out. Why? You have more folk being sick coming out of incarceration. I just received 2 of them in my program. They couldn't get the medical treatment that they were incarcerated. So it's time to start letting folk go.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Anyone else who want to speak? Please, just come line up. Please, ma'am, go ahead. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kimberly Dyke Carson. I stand before you as an American Aborigine, and I would like to speak in favor if Delegate Campbell's bill is amended to strike out 6 words. And those 6 words are, that is not a violent felony. We all, or some of us, may know that even though nonviolent felonies are committed by men and women who may be on a drug, can be nonviolent or violent. Doesn't mean there wasn't a drug issue or something else that can be corrected. We don't need to continue discriminating against, and a felony is a felony is a felony. Yes, there are levels, but it's still a felony. And you said the other one can be spoken as well? Or I can wait.
Well, why don't you wait?
I'll
Because
wait.
there are a number of people waiting who want to speak.
Thank you.
I concur exactly with what, my name is Alice McFarland, I concur what you said. I think there needs to be a redefinition of violent felon. I served time in Goochland. I never in trouble in my life, active in my community, benefit organizer, and I did a friend a favor, resulted in a distribution charge. Distribution is a violent felony. So therefore, on my record, I'm a violent felon.
I understand.
So if Mr. Campbell's bill were passed, I think there needs to be a redefinition of violence. There were no guns, there was nothing involved. Although they tore my car apart looking for all these things that the person, their CI, said to get herself out of trouble. Regardless of that, I'm not a violent person. They actually hurt my community by taking me out of my community as a first-time offender sentenced to 10 years.
Thank you, ma'am. Sir, please.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Dominique Martin with New Virginia Majority. I'm not speaking to either bill in particular. I'm supportive of both, whatever is the committee's desire. But just in general, just wanted to say that we support bills that address the scourge that is mass incarceration. We do think measures like this are helpful to address that problem. Gives people an incentive to turn their life around, gives them motivation to work towards something. So we believe that the incentives in either of these bills would be sufficient to help, in a very small way as a first step to address some of the problems of mass incarceration. So thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Who else? Got 35 seconds. Come on, someone. I know you want to say something. Go ahead, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Frances Ross, and you may have gotten an email from me. I am going to be very honest with you. I feel so like maybe everything's getting pushed from here to there, and that for me, this bill is better than what I have now, because it does affect my forever person. But there are so many people that it doesn't affect. because of a choice that they made. We've all made choices that we wish we'd done different, and I just don't wanna not support this, but I don't wanna support it because I don't feel like it includes everyone, and I think that they've been charged, and I think that their sentence, their time, is gonna affect their charges, whether it was violent or non-violent, and I think that they're in prison. And since they're there, that means it could just go across the board.
Thank you, ma'am. I appreciate it. Are there
Thank you.
folks who
Sorry
want-
for
No, no,
saying
it's all good. Are there folks who want to speak in opposition to HB 1370? Please line up. I see no opposition. All right, are there folks on the committee that want to address the subcommittee? The bill, have a question for the patron or comment on?
Sure, I'd have a motion at appropriate time.
All right, anyone want to make a comment or a question? All right, make your motion.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we refer the bill to, courts. Courts of Justice.
Can I ask you, would the motion be to report and refer to courts?
To refer.
I don't believe we have the power to simply refer to courts. I think we can report and refer to courts. I don't know if that motion will be entertained.
I'll make that motion.
I hear that motion.
Second.
I hear a second. All right, the motion is made to report this bill, HB 1370, and to refer it to the Courts of Justice Committee. Will the clerk please open the roll? I love the Campbells. All right, there's been, close the roll, please. Oh, okay, close the roll, please. And the bill has been reported and referred to the Courts of Justice by a vote of 5 to 3. Thank you, Delegate. All right, Delegate Scott. Tell us about your bill, please.
Of course, my bill is a lot better than that guy's. Oh, no, I'm joking. I appreciate Delegate Campbell's work. It's a good first step, and I'm proud to have him present this bill. That's a good bill, too. And if we don't, his may be easier to sell than mine. My bill, first of all, I got a few minutes, so I'm gonna tell you real quick. There's an impact statement that the department, whoever does this impact statement, is a very thorough one, and it talks about all of the things that we have to do and how much money it's going to spend. And I think I see 12 million in here, and I see we need another 200,000 for this. And when you add it all up, when I did the math in this impact statement, it says that in the first year impact, 6,972 prisoners would be released in the first year. I took a low estimate, $27,000 a year we spent. 6,972 times 27,000, that's $188 million, $244,000. If you want to solve some of your budget issues, you said you want military wives and spouses and stuff to get stuff, get some of this $188 million in the first year. You're gonna get $1 billion, you'll get $1 billion in 5 years. This is cost effective. What we're doing now is we're spending our way into oblivion, that's one.
Delegate Scott, why don't you explain to those who may not have read all the details of your bill exactly what your bill does?
So what my bill does is take what the Department of Corrections does right now in their policy. If you pull it up, they have 4 levels of classification, and they give time based on the maximum 4.5 days that we have in the code. And right now, you could get 0 days if you don't meet the criteria. If you're level 4, you get nothing. If you're at the top, you get 4 days. What I do is I add additional days to that level 1. So I give 13 days the first year, level 1, and you get those, and level 2 is 7.5 days, level 3 is 3.5 days, and level 4 is what people who are not behaving or not cooperating get right now anyway, which is 0 days. So what this does is incentivize those folks who are doing everything that you need to be doing while you're in there. So you get a program, if you're doing your education, you're doing training, you work, all of that stuff is incentivized, and you can get 13 days that first year. If you do everything right every year, you can earn up to 30 days. You can get a lot of time off. So it would end up reducing your sentence significantly, reducing our cost to the system significantly, and still put public safety first. Not only are you going to help public safety, but you're going to bring back people who are truly rehabilitated. And we'll have a criminal justice system and not a criminal punishment system. We're not naive. Nobody's naive. There will be people who are dangerous or who did something wrong. That's what incarceration does. It removes you from the situation. You get retribution. You get punishment. But you also get rehabilitation. You also get correction. You also get an opportunity, hopefully, to reconcile some of your demons if you have those. So what I'm saying is, and we can do that very smartly with managing people's time while they're there. So that's what this bill does. You want to find the money. It's all, the system that corrections is using is already there. In their impact statement, they talk about the fact that they'll need to run some computer programs. You know, if government is 12 million, I send it to Amazon, we probably do it for $1 million. But that's okay. That's it. We'll do stuff. We'll do stuff. The $12 million estimate that they use plus what they cost for staff, we make that. We save that easily in the first year. Okay, they said 12 million, 13 million. Give them 50. We're gonna save 200 million the first year. So what I'm saying is, let's introduce this bill, let's put it in place, and it's a good bill.
Delegate, there are a number of people have questions and
Sure.
comments. Delegate Corey, you were the first.
Yes.
Called my attention. You can also use your request to speak button, by the way.
I could.
Everyone. This is oh, there isn't one. Oh, okay.
That is here.
All right, there isn't one. Go ahead. Fair enough. Go ahead, Delegate Corey.
Thank you. Thank you for presenting this. Could you very quickly summarize, the differences between your bill and Dr. Campbell's bill?
Della Campbell's bill has a non-violent, violent effect, and he maximizes the days, I think,
I think you
to
should
10
be
and a half
louder.
days.
This is for everyone.
So he does it for 10 and a half days.
Uh-huh.
He raised it 10 and a half days, right?
Out of 30.
Yeah, you ordinarily will pull 85% of the
Right,
felony sentence,
right.
this will reduce it to 60.
Right, and mine is doing about the same thing on average if you add it up.
Right.
So that's one. Two, I don't have that distinction between violent and non-violent. I want everybody that's coming home to get right. The data says they're coming home. You're standing in Walmart next to folks that have been in jail every day. You're doing stuff every day. So don't be naive. You're seeing folks. So that's what the bill does. That's different. So there's a lot more incentives and programs. I want the people in corrections, the professionals that are in corrections, they want to do corrections. Right now we got people just watching people in cages.
I know.
I'm trying to get people to do programs.
So Delegate Campbell's bill gives it leaves the current 4 days. Leaves the current 4 days per 30 for violent people for a violent felony. Although, as that woman pointed out, sometimes think you might be for violent are not necessarily classified that way. But provides 10 and a half days per 30, or 1/3 of the time, for non-violent crimes. That's what Delegate Campbell's bill does. Delegate Scott's bill, you correct me if I'm wrong, Delegate Scott, sets up 4 levels depending on the level of cooperation that a prisoner inmate has.
Which is already in it. They already use this. This is the Department of Corrections
with
policy
regard to
already.
sentence credits. And as I understand these levels, basically the better you do, the fewer demerits you get, the more you participate, the more you cooperate. You get up in levels, you get close to level 1 is the best level, and level 4 is the lowest level. And the higher you go up, the more days you get. And then the other thing that it does is if you're in level 1, the best level, it starts with 13 days for the first year, and then it can go up to 16 days in the second year, 20 days in the third year, 25 days in the fourth year, and up to 5th year. And 30 days would actually give you half time after when you're in level 1. The other thing that Delegate Scott's bill does is it's retroactive. So that would mean that a number of people would get out immediately if they met this criteria.
Follow-up questions?
Yes, Corey.
Could you quickly contrast the fiscal impact statements?
Well, both would lead to earlier release. So, fiscal impact is not ultimately my decision, but I would believe that Delegate Scott is correct that the savings from people leaving jail, since jail is very expensive, it strikes me that would be more than enough to pay for the fiscal impact of the cost of doing this program. So there may be.
They're similar in terms of the ratio of expenditure?
Well, I think Delegate Scott's bill would have a lot more people leave prison sooner. But again, I don't know if anyone has any evidence on that. Delegate Will, yes.
Mr. Chairman, got not evidence to that, but a comment on the line of question.
Sure.
I would note that just because we're potentially under this formula, if you let people out, doesn't mean that the total cost goes away per person.
I understand.
Yeah, the jail's still going to stay open if you got one person or 100.
Mr. Chairman, Delegate Will, that's just like schools.
Right, there's a marginal cost and an average cost. Delegate Cole, you had your hand up earlier.
I don't think that.
All right, I'll tell you what, let's hear from the people who are here to talk about this bill, and then we can continue our discussion after we hear it. So if you line up, please, if you're in support of this bill, maybe the advocates will speak twice, but if you're not here as an advocate, I'll try to bring newer people in, but please go ahead.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah, we have 5 minutes.
5 minutes.
Yes.
Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee. Again, my name is Jen Carter, and I'm co-founder of the Humanization Project, and we helped draft this bill. We work by telling stories of good people that have been affected by the criminal justice system. So we tell stories of people, a lot of people who have gotten out, who are doing good work in the world, like Richard Walker, who is standing behind me. You know, this bill really, as Don said, will save Virginia taxpayers hundreds of millions of dollars, which is amazing. But it's also going to incentivize rehabilitation, and that's really what it's all about. We know from research in New York, a city which has reduced its prison population in half recently, while at the same time reducing its crime rate in half, that on an individual level, the drivers of violence are shame, isolation, exposure to violence itself, and an inability to meet one's economic needs. The four main tenets of being in prison are shame, isolation, exposure to violence, and an inability to meet one's economic needs. Keeping people in prison longer doesn't make society safer. In fact, it may actually make us less safe. But we do know that making better citizens does make us more safe. And that's what House Bill 1532 is about, giving people behind bars an incentive to better themselves. I ask you to look in your own minds and hearts and ask yourself what you believe is the real purpose of putting people behind bars. Is it simply punishment and confinement, or is it to make better citizens and make our society safer?
Thank you very much.
My name is Cruz. I'm from Westburg, Virginia. I am the mother of an incarcerated son. I have 6 children. I'm caring for his young sons, but I'm Republican, but I also came here to speak as a mental health counselor. I'm a school social worker for Cameron County Schools. I'm in an alternative setting, and I have spent my life overcoming my own abuse and addiction, and worked very hard to break the generational cycle of that abuse. And we're there. I'm seeing the change in my son. I feel like the incarceration has been a gift, and it is done well. But I also feel like that they need that opportunity. They would need that opportunity to demonstrate that crisis has opened their eyes and made the opportunity for change. And then we need the supports in place, the mental health supports, the spiritual supports, the community supports, the family supports. I work on trauma, the attachment issues, the issues of trauma is what leads to a lot of the crime, the addiction.
I understand.
So
Thank you, ma'am. I want to get some other people voices in. Please go ahead, ma'am.
Hi, Lauren Penn, Bassett, Virginia. I was married to a guy, 11 years, had children. My kids have suffered because they grew up their whole life without a father. The sentence that he got wasn't proportionally correct to his crime, so therefore, leaving my kids at 9 months and growing up completely without a father. I just want to say, just think about the families. It's not just the inmates who have to suffer. It is the parents. It is the moms. It is the single parents out here who have to raise the children as well. So if they can rehabilitate themselves, and if they can make a step towards greatness, I feel like they should be rewarded.
Thank you, ma'am. Please go ahead.
Hi, my name is Evelyn Stevenson, and my husband is a veteran from the Coast Guard. He received an anti-terrorism medal. He had 3 good conduct medals, a Presidential Unit Award, and a National Defense Service Medal. He was one of the first responders in 9/11. He was there over a month and a half on Ground Zero. He was one of the first responders in Hurricane Katrina. He made a mistake and cost him almost 11 years in prison. And he has turned his life around. He currently graduated from the SOAR program, which is, he was one of the first graduates on it. He doesn't have any charges. And he's just one of the people that are there, of many others that have turned their life around that don't belong there anymore. That they have shown that they can change their lives, they have learned from their mistakes, and they're ready to come home. And they're ready to be productive citizens, and they just need that hope, because they don't have the hope right now.
Thank you, ma'am. Sir, you spoke before. I just guess folks who haven't spoken before, please. Please, ma'am.
I'm Gail Dietz, and I'm from King George County. She's talking about my son. This is an opportunity for Virginia to change for the good. These men and women who are incarcerated have no hope. They have none. Not unless you pass this bill. Many of them have changed with no incentives or hope, but they've changed. To me, that says a lot. Virginia's not doing their part in helping. I support this bill wholeheartedly. He made a mistake. I'm proud of him because of what he has done, not what Virginia has done for him, but what he has done for himself. And what is Virginia doing to help these people who seek to do well? I'm hoping you pass this bill. And to those who oppose this bill, you must not have had family members incarcerated. This affects the entire family, not just one who is incarcerated.
Thank you, ma'am. I'm sorry to rush you along, but
I'm gonna
we
just
gotta
take
go
30
along.
seconds. Basically, it's time to change the narrative from being a punitive state as opposed to the redemptive state. You know, it's time to give folk a second chance. If Mr. Turing was still here, I can probably concur with him that DOC's operating budget is over $2 billion, the highest in the country. This is a plan, a proposal, a possibility of reducing some of that money that's going into the Department of Corrections, and hopefully it will help release some folk out of incarceration.
I hear you. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. Please.
I'm-
I'm gonna ask you, like, just.
I'm gonna make it as quickly as
very
possible
quick,
to
please.
respect all of your time. I appreciate it. My name is Lisa Spees. I'm the Director of Virginians for Judicial Reform. I'm going to read a short statement from an offender that I've worked with for more than 2 years.
I respectfully, ma'am, if you'll just say, you said who you are, just say, I assume you support this bill.
I do. I support this bill.
You certainly put it in the record, and we would like to have it in the record. Ma'am, you've spoken before. I'm sorry, we know that, how many people in this room support this bill? Raise your hand. Okay, so Chair recognizes at least 56, and I understand there are people in the hall, at least 70, 80 people, and I know there's many, many more.
I don't know if I support this bill.
No, you don't know?
I'm on the fence.
Well, I'll tell you what, if you're on the fence, we'll wait for the opposition, I'll get you in a minute. All right. Anything that has not been said, we've heard about the families, we've heard about the pain of the incarcerated, anything that has not been said, and I know you've spoken before. All right,
I'll change
30
my hair.
seconds, go ahead.
Nobody has said this. Not only is it gonna help us, the inmates, save money that you could spend on other things like the schools, not that, it's gonna make the Department of Corrections better because their COs are not gonna have to deal with their freshness because they don't wanna get a charge. It's gonna make a better work environment, it's gonna make it safer. I mean, this is
People
like
are gonna
a great thing.
comply, I understand your point, but people are gonna comply more with regulations if they get rewarded.
Yes, I mean, and it's
I
hard to
understand.
comply with the regulations, but
All right.
this is just great.
Well, people who oppose HB 1532, please come forward. Just line up, if we give them room, those that oppose HB 1532. You said, ma'am, you may oppose it, all right, go ahead.
I may.
All right,
Only if the Department of Planning and Budget does not change page 3, paragraph 1, sentence 2. Page 3, paragraph 1, sentence 2. Once these words are removed, then I will support it. And those are, but does not include
We
those.
don't have pages.
I'll read those words.
is
Is it a line number?
you have a line number or a paragraph?
Is this what you're looking
B?
at?
I don't, it's the fiscal impact statement, sorry.
Okay,
Oh,
fiscal
fiscal
impact's not
impact
part of the bill. Thank you,
It's
ma'am.
not?
No.
I supported it.
All right.
Hey, I learned.
I understand, and we'll give full time to opposition. Yes, sir.
Yeah, my name's John Mahoney. I'm the Commonwealth's attorney for Caroline County, and I've practiced in the defense bar for many, many years before I got this job. 90% roughly of sentences are the result of plea agreements, and typically nobody is happy in a plea agreement. Families think it's too much time, the victims think it's not enough. I will tell you, I support the idea of comprehensive criminal justice reform. That includes reevaluating sentencing, it includes looking at parole, everything. But we ought not take a Band-Aid approach to it. It ought to be done in a comprehensive manner. And I suggest that all these things would do well in the crime commission.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Others who oppose this bill, please. Others who oppose HB 1532, please step forward. All right, let's discuss amongst ourselves. Members of the subcommittee, questions, comments? Delegate Simons.
I have a question. If we report and refer this bill,
Yes.
are we looking at it being rolled in are the two bills going to be rolled in together?
No, my understanding is if we report for this bill to courts, the courts will consider both this bill and Campbell's bill, which we already reported, and will do whatever it wishes to do there. They could pass them both forward or strike them both or send them appropriations, whatever they want to do. We simply would give them a chance to consider this bill as well as the other bill.
And I would just add that there's a couple of bills that they have over there as well too, that deal with very similar, isn't that right? Taylor?
Teacher, they have. Mr. Chair, they have two bills that deal with the conditional release of geriatric prisoners, so not exactly the earned sentence credits, but similar to, I believe, Delegate Scott's other bill, not exactly the same
Yes.
topic already.
So those are actually different things. One is whether someone is old and or infirm and therefore should be released or get parole. This is good time credits or just automatic credits. They're similar but not exactly the same issue. Delegate Simons.
Can I speak to the bill?
Please.
Mr. Chairman, I definitely favor this bill, and I favor sending both bills and sending them both on to the Senate. I think this is so important. I want a lot of different opportunities to make progress on this so that one of them at least can make it through the Senate.
Thank you, Delegate. Others on the subcommittee have comments or questions for the patron?
I'm on course, I don't care.
All right, well, hold on. Let me give the patron the last word. Go ahead.
The last word is this. We're in the state of Virginia. Brookings Institute did a study. They did a study of incarceration rates by zip code in the whole country. Top 10. 3 of the top 10, 8 of the top 35 are in the state of Virginia. Number 2 is in my city where I represent, Portsmouth. We got the second highest incarceration rate in the city of Portsmouth, zip code 23704. In Norfolk, we're number 8. In the country, Richmond, we're number 9. And then Newport News, 19. Richmond again at 26, 27, and 30. We got a problem. And it's here. If you're poor, these are concentrated poverty communities. If you're poor in these zip codes, you're going to jail. And the chances of you getting out, if we're depending on folks like this to get us out, we're in trouble. So we need you guys to put some policy in place. Because we know human beings are not making the best thing. We need policy. My policy, Delegate Campbell's, any one of these, I'm good with. We need to start this thing moving in the right direction. We said out of our mouths just now, we said $2 billion like it was nothing, 2 times. He said he spent $2 billion in state correctional and $2 billion in local jails. That's $4 billion. What are we doing? We need to think about this. Whatever y'all do tonight, y'all need to think about it. I don't know what the courts are going to do next if it gets there, but this is a situation that will not go away. So we can run from it as long as we want to. It's going to keep running back to you. You see the energy in the room? This is just I didn't call these people. I don't know these people. I didn't call these people. I know one person in here that I knew before, and that's it. These people are paying attention to this bill on their own because they're looking for hope, their loved ones, and you guys are the ones that will be able to give them an opportunity to do the right thing. That's all.
Thank you. I hear a second. Will the clerk please open the roll?
Let's go say $2 billion.
Please close the roll. Now, before you leave, Delegate Scott, you had another bill on geriatric release, HB 431.
I would move to
strike that bill?
Yes, right.
All right, it's a motion to strike HB 431 from the docket.
Somebody, I got to vote for it.
It's already up.
They don't know the thing.
We're good.
So now,
all right.
So now y'all got to go to court. They're going to try to make it take off the dollars. I don't know. It doesn't matter. Y'all have all this energy. Y'all got to hit the speak. Y'all do it. They're going to try.
Yes, Delegate Francis has been here a long time.
Actually,
Delegate Ward, are you in the middle of the committee? Are you in the middle of the committee? got people coming in. All right.
Oh, yes.
Go ahead.
Yes. Let me know when it is.
All right.
Let me know.
If folks can please exit quietly and talk out in the halls. We still have more business to do in this subcommittee. All right, let's go with Delegate Ward, HB 551.
House Bill 551, Healthy Community Secure Care legislation. Give you a little background. Healthy Community Secure Care legislation will ensure that Virginia is following the best documented practices for juvenile justice. It's departing from some of the racist and destructive status quo, ensuring that secure care happens in small facilities, 30 beds or less, within the community. The youth is slummed, and that's a critical step forward in Virginia. It promotes young people being treated justly and given the opportunity all young people deserve to learn and to grow from their mistakes. Further, it moves us forward to a deep and sustainable public safety that can only be secured through combining investment in young people with investment in the community. Let me tell you a few reasons that we brought this bill. As I said, the 30 beds is something that we learned from research, not research done by me or anyone, but by the experts say that children are better in smaller facilities. And the Healthy Community Secure Care legislation, it ensures smaller facilities with a maximum of 30 young people in each facility. Young people are served by smaller facilities for the same reason that we know smaller schools and smaller classrooms are better for young people. These young people have already experienced quite a bit of drama in their lives. We already know that it may be more difficult with some of these children, so if we got them in smaller settings, it's going to be much better. Smaller juvenile correctional facilities, such as the smaller schools, ensure an environment where young people know their peers, they know their administrators, and that the reduction in anonymity that's associated isolation reduces the likelihood of violence and increases the chance for trust building among peers and between peers and administrators. This trust is critical to ensuring a rehabilitative process that promotes the mental health of youth and public safety. You can imagine the children being sent far away from home to a facility. They know immediately that they are far away from home. These are people they don't know, they don't necessarily understand the dialect or the accent. They know they're not home. No one looks like them, no one sounds like them. So you still have that feeling of isolation. So a typical youth who repeatedly appears before the juvenile court comes from a chaotic home and a neighborhood environment, just chaotic. And sometimes he has learned that the world can be unpredictable, capricious, threatening, and grossly unfair. To the developing youth who is just beginning to learn what he can expect from social authority, the juvenile justice system represents the social order. If the child's experience with a societal authority
You got Delegate Ward.
You want me to stop?
What I'd like you to do,
Okay,
Delegate
fine.
Ward, is
That was just basically it.
be
Okay.
very specific about
Okay,
what
that-
your bill does, please.
That is it, okay, and we do have an amendment, correct?
Oh, okay.
I've
Let's-
got people to explain it, I'm sorry.
It's all
Let
good.
me just tell you real fast.
Well, first, why don't we move the amendment? How
Okay,
about that?
move the amendment.
Do I hear?
So make it
All
real
right.
quick, make it real
All right,
quick.
all in favor of moving the amendment, say aye.
Aye.
Aye, all right, we're
All
working
right,
with
I'm
the
not
amendment.
giving you all that other stuff. Bottom line, children are better served, research says, in smaller facilities,
So what your bill does.
closer to their neighborhoods.
I understand. What your
Right.
bill does, as I understand it, is it requires 30-bed facilities, is that right?
Yes, that's what
Okay.
we hope
And,
for.
and close to where a juvenile lives?
Right.
Okay.
You want it close so their family can visit them, sort of on a bus line.
And does it, what does it do with the current facilities that are larger than 30 beds? Does it empty those out, or is it for new facilities, or what?
They can be new facilities, but they don't have to be brand new. They could be, a structure already in the community. And we are talking about in the community.
All right.
These are our children coming to the community, our community.
Did you say you have someone here who's going to
I
explain that?
do.
All
I
right.
have
Who-
some
who do you-
wonderful
Who do you have
people.
here?
Where are they?
We're right here.
Oh, thank you. Cause I was gonna
Alright.
read every
No, yeah, no, actually, before they line up, is there someone here from the Department of Juvenile Justice, Department of Corrections?
When's the amendment?
Yeah, that's a good question. Tell us what the amendment is.
They can let you know.
They can let me know, all right.
Yeah, we have.
But let me just quickly ask, before you even get to that, someone from the Department of Juvenile Justice, ma'am,
Yes, I'm Valerie Working Director, Virginia Department of Juvenile Justice.
and your thoughts on this bill?
The administration has no official position on the bill. The bill aligns with the spirit of DJ transformation that we embarked upon via study in 2016-2017, with the report filed with the General Assembly that year. We do believe in smaller facilities. We do believe in closer to home. We have been working that program for several years now. We've reduced the numbers of young people incarcerated from nearly 600 in 2014 to just over 300 today. We have placed 150 young people in community placement programs around the Commonwealth. We have only 200 kids remaining in secure care. We closed all but one large facility. Our goal is to move to smaller facilities. DJJ has been working with the Department of General Services to cite a 60-bed facility based on the study that was submitted to the General Assembly in 2017 in the eastern part of the state, where the largest number of our communities come from. So in spirit, we believe we have a similar spirit and goals. The task force report did not recommend anything smaller than 60 because of the array of services we want to provide and the scale. So we want to continue to provide the array of career technical programs that we have at our current facility. We have to provide medical care at a full-scale school. The children that come to us now are high-risk kids because the rest of them we are treating in community-based settings, community-based services. They require a secure environment per court order, and so they cannot leave for school or medical and those types of things. And so we have been working very hard to cite a 60-bed facility in Eastern
Got it, all right, and we'll get more to that 60 and 30 in a minute. I do want to give you a chance to explain the amendment and have folks, all right, so let's set 5 minutes on the clock, and folks, first of all, the people who drafted the amendment, are they professionals, or these delegate, who do you want to speak on, what's your amendment?
I'm an attorney and I don't.
All right, come on up and tell us exactly what the substitute does,
So
what the bill does
the-
with the substitute.
Sure. So there were issues with whether or not it would require the language as it was originally written. Would it require for community placement programs to receive youth, whether or not they had the appropriate services in place to support those young people? And so the way it is written now, it says that the full array of the Department of Juvenile Justice placements will be considered, and the most appropriate placement will be the place where a particular youth will.
So does this require 30 beds or not?
This piece of legislation, it does indeed. There can be no facility larger than 30 beds, and that each facility would be within the highest committing communities, highest committing being measured by a 5% incarceration rate for a particular locality.
So the question either to the delegate or the attorney is, do we have the facilities now to take care of all the folks that are currently incarcerated?
And so the plan now that the Department of Juvenile Justice has put forward, it calls for a 60-bed and a 96-bed facility, which is 156 beds. We are saying 30-bed facilities where they are needed, and so if that means 5 facilities, then that is what we would do. We would build as many as are necessary. When we look at where young people are coming from, Norfolk has the highest commitment rate, and then comes Newport News, Hampton, then Richmond. So, I mean, we know exactly where kids are coming from. So when we start looking at where facilities should be placed, we are simply saying, make sure that you are putting them
right where kids are coming from.
Thank you. So Delegate, it doesn't sound like these exist now. What is the time frame? I mean, if this bill goes into effect July, and we don't have facilities, what happens? What's the time frame to transition? Yes, is that explained?
I will just note
Yes.
that in the bill, if you're looking at the substitute
Yes.
on 876, the requirement for the centers to be designed to combine 30 juveniles or fewer is just for juvenile community correctional centers established after July 1st.
Ah, this is for new centers.
Yes.
Okay.
And I will also just note, just some additional, there were some technical changes in the substitute that also change any reference to juvenile correctional facilities to also reflect the change from the bill so that they're also called juvenile community correctional
Got it.
facilities.
So new centers built then under this substitute, correct me if I'm wrong, patron, new centers built after July 1st would have to be 30 beds or smaller and within the community. It doesn't affect existing facilities, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, Doug Simons.
So I know in my former role as a school board member, we often had these difficult situations where we wanted students to have a smaller environment, but it meant we had to sacrifice things like gym class and art class because there wasn't the scale to make sure we had the right teachers. So what I'm hearing from the Department of Juvenile Corrections is that they're concerned about the scale, and so I would ask the delegate or some of the representatives what can be done to make sure that you have as many opportunities for students in a smaller setting as you might in the 60 bed setting.
Delegate Ward?
Well, for one thing, they would be right in the community. Those people would be more likely to come in or decide to work in those facilities because they're sort of close to home, and that's what I believe people will do.
Delegate Simons.
But I understood from the Department of Corrections that there are restrictions on, I mean, it's not like these are people who are gonna be able to go enjoy the facilities at the public gymnasium and go out and use facilities in the community. I mean, they're gonna be housed in a place where we might want them to have their own gym or their own.
So, and let me add to that, ask Delegate Ward. The department says they've done a study and they found 60 were right. Would 60 satisfy you, or do you really want to stick to that 30? And if so, please explain why.
Yes, because there's other research that says that 30 is the best. I know what, and I've heard that because, I've heard the presentation before, but our research has shown independent that 30, and anyone that's been in a classroom, you don't want more than 30 children in your class. And that is even if they are well-behaved students. 30 is a lot.
So Delegate Ward, what about the argument that Delegate Simons is raising and that the juvenile justice representative has pointed out that you can provide more services if it's 60 than 30? I'd just like you to address that argument.
I believe that we will rise to the occasion. I really do. I believe if we have those facilities and the people in the community understand why we are here and what is needed, I do believe that we will be able to provide those services.
Okay, Delegate Robinson.
So when we're talking 30 juveniles, what would be the age of those juveniles? They would go from what age to what age?
Delegate Ward.
I'm not sure. What is that?
Someone else want to answer that question?
So,
Ma'am?
young people as young as 8 could be locked up, and as old as a young person that, say, has a blended sentence, they would be in a facility until potentially their 21st birthday, when they would transfer over to DOC.
So,
Delegate Robinson.
can I follow up?
Please.
So potentially you would have 30 from 8 years old to 21 within that same facility because it's within that community?
No, absolutely not, because there are
So that
ranges of services. That won't be the only placement style, and even currently now, there are no children that young that are being housed in a facility that's secure. The younger children, I mean, I'm sure that you would even agree that those are young people who are in community placement or alternative placement programs, because the department has done an amazing job of creating an array of services. So we aren't looking at every child that is touched by the system to end up in this facility.
Delegate Robinson, did you have anything more?
No,
Okay, Delegate Wilk, please, did you have a comment or question? All right, Delegate.
Sorry,
Yes,
if I
please.
might clarify that question.
Yes.
Per the Code of Virginia, young people can only be committed between the ages of 11 and 18. Our jurisdiction does extend to 21 if they come into our care prior to the age of 21. We accomplish also smaller facilities by housing young people in pods of 12. And that's how we accomplish a small facility feeling within a slightly larger environment. And when we had the task force, we had national experts to come in. We've not found a citation that says 30. The Missouri model is most often quoted, and we have consultants here even today from Missouri, and their smallest facility is 36 secure care beds.
And ma'am, when you have pods of 12, they tend to be similar age youth in those pods?
Yes, we classify them by age and by severity of offense. This bill also says that we shall place them at the closest facility near them. Sometimes for treatment needs, we have to place them at an alternative setting. For instance, not every facility is equipped to provide specialized care such as substance abuse treatment or sex offender treatment. So just as DOC sometimes has to place young adults in a facility with those specialized needs, we also look at that as a provision of meeting their actual needs. And so the bill speaks to only placing them closer to home.
Okay, so Delegate Simons first, go ahead.
Go.
Okay, Delegate Wilk.
Ladies first.
No.
One of you, please go.
Thank you, Mr.
Delegate
Chairman.
Wilk, yes.
Question for the department. So when you're looking at facilities, are you moving, and forgive me if you covered this, but are you looking at the facilities kind of on the basis as the delegate's proposing, kind of a regional thing? Are you just socking them up out in the middle of nowhere? Or are you bringing them, are you making an effort to bring them closer to home, so to speak?
We are actually making that effort. Our data actually shows that in the last 2 fiscal years, we now are placing more than 60 young people closer to home using our full array of services. There are 7 localities that meet the criteria delineated in this bill. They are Norfolk, Portsmouth, Hampton, Newport News, Henrico, the city of Richmond, and Prince William County. 72% of the young people committed from those localities have been placed within a 60-mile radius of them.
Thank you. Delegate Simons.
I remembered my question.
Go ahead.
So, Mr. Chairman, one of the things that I'm very concerned about is making sure that we do have facilities near Newport News and Hampton for our local, to make sure that they do have access to families and bus routes. So I'm not really clear on if there currently is a facility that's being used that's on a bus route in Hampton Roads. I just
Let me ask you,
would like
ma'am,
to
I
know.
didn't catch your name, so why don't you?
Sorry,
repeat
Valerie
it?
Boykin, Director of Virginia Department of Juvenile Justice.
Thank you, Director Boykin. So, Director Boykin, what currently exists in Virginia now? Lockup, juvenile, correctional, you're not using the right words, lockup, juvenile, correctional facilities. How many are there? What are their beds? Tell us the current situation. Maybe I'll give us an idea before we talk about future. We know what we have now. And how many
We
people?
maintain one large juvenile correctional center. We would like to.
Only
over
one in
time-
the entire Commonwealth?
Only one. We closed all but one. We closed 3 in the last 4 years. That is Barnard Juvenile Correctional Center in Chesterfield County. It has a rated capacity of 270. We house approximately 200 on any given day, and 150 of the other young people are placed in alternative settings around the Commonwealth. We would like to eventually get out of that facility because it was retrofitted in the 90s to look more like an adult prison. And we don't operate prisons in juvenile justice. We operate juvenile correctional centers. In addition to that, we have 10 community placement programs where we've contracted with local detention centers around the Commonwealth that they offer a pod with therapeutic treatment. We provided training to those providers to offer those. We are about at capacity and expanding those. We have contracts with 9 detention reentry programs also located in detention centers. We have 9 residential treatment programs that we contract with, some of those in the Hampton Roads area, 8 group homes that we contracted with,
So,
for a
Director
total of
Boykin,
36 programs.
I guess how many children, how many minors in Virginia are currently incarcerated? in a facility anywhere, whether it be.
Today's count was just under 350. I think it was 342 if I remember correctly,
Okay.
sir.
Delegate Ward, did you want to say something? I didn't know if your hand had raised.
No, I
All right.
think she answered it.
Okay, Delegate Campbell.
I have a question. I'm looking at the fiscal impact study.
Yes, sir.
And it appears that the two facilities you're talking about, that one of them's been approved for $53 million. It's already been designed and approved.
Yes, sir, we have preliminary designs for a center in the east. We've tried to site it. We were approached by the city of Chesapeake and then the county of Isle of Wight, both ultimately due to the not in my backyard syndrome, ended up not allowing us to site there. And those are the plans for the 60-bed. We continue to work with the Department of General Services to identify a more appropriate site in the eastern part of the state, because we did have 126 young people committed from that area last year. So that is our goal, and we continue to work to cite that.
I believe Doug Wilk has that up first. Go ahead, Doug.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director, so in the 60-person facility, I mean, are you seeing, I'm not even sure the right term to use, but are you seeing harmony? Are you able to keep the children, what I'm looking for, I mean, are they behaving themselves? You know, whatever you wanna call it, I mean, is there?
Sir, we've not yet built the 60. That is our goal. The young people to sort of model that, we have them living in 12-bed pods at Bonnier, and their behavior has improved drastically. The rate of offending, the rate of fights, the rate of those types of things has gone down significantly over the past few years. I'm afraid I didn't bring that specific data with me tonight, but yes, that behavior, again, we model a community. We also provide transportation to a CPP. We have 4 in the eastern region that we use. We provide family transportation to those sites, and we even bring families to Bonnier at least twice a month to visit with their young people.
Thank you, Director. I'll tell you what, we'll get to more questions. I'd like to hear from the folks in the audience, and then we'll come back with more questions and discussion. We'll have, I don't know what time it is. Ooh, it's already late. All right, let's just do it 3 minutes on the clock then. And everyone who supports the bill could please line up. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. My name is Gary Broderick, and I'm the Legislative Coordinator for Rise for Youth. I've worked as staff in a group home, I've worked as staff in elementary school, and I've worked as an advocate for parents, students, and teachers. And I'm here to say that I am proud of this legislation that was developed listening to community, listening to juvenile justice experts across the country. I'm proud of Delegate Ward, who has called this her Queen Esther moment. And I'm proud of the coalition we built. This is supported by the ACLU, by the NAACP, by the Virginia Organizing, by the Commonwealth Institute for Fiscal Analysis, and by the Action Alliance. And so we have all come together and we have said we can do what's best for young people. We can put young people in the opportunity to heal, learn, and grow. And from my perspective, when we think about 60 bed versus 30 beds, and I understand the need for services, but you know, if I have strep throat, I might need to take penicillin and I might need to lie down. But you wouldn't tell me not to take penicillin because I need to lie down over there and the penicillin is over there. You need both. And so we know that young people at Bonnier experience higher sexual abuse than is the norm across the country. We know that's what happens when you have bigger facilities. So 30 beds is a commitment to actually giving young people the opportunity to heal, learn, and grow. It is what they need in addition to any other services. We know that this is best for public safety because it intervenes in cycles of recidivism. And we know it was not just NIMBYism, the reason these efforts were not successful to build a youth prison in Isle of Wight and in Chesapeake. We were able to build a multiracial coalition who understood that you institutionalize a racial antagonism if you create a youth prison over here that houses black youth and it's used as the economic development plan for a white rural area. And people came together and stood against that. So I think we have a great opportunity here and I'm proud of it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. There are others who want to speak. Please go ahead, ma'am.
My name is Lauren Ransford. I'm a pastor at Bonnier Juvenile Correctional Center. I run a gospel choir there. I'm there every week with the kids. And there are 200 of them right now. And when we asked them what they needed most, and they said, visits, come visit us. They're desperately lonely because their families can't get there. Their families want to get there. They can't get there. There is free transportation, but it's not on an everyday kind of schedule that meets working families' needs when they have time off and when they can get there and as much as they can get They're desperately lonely. They need to be in their home communities.
Hey, thank you, ma'am. Please. Also, okay. Please.
Hi, my name is Raylan Williams. I'm with the Virginia Sexual and Domestic Action Alliance. I just want to urge you to support this bill because, as we know, children who are responding to or have bad behavior are often reacting towards unrecognized trauma, and we want to stop this cycle of violence because, as we know, hurt people, and we want to get these youth prevention and take care of them so they don't end up in the system.
Thank you. Thank you. Why don't you get in the back of the line, because there's a couple people there.
She was directing me.
All right.
Yeah.
I'll tell you what.
I'm taking her away.
2 more minutes, that's a hard and fast 2
Okay.
minutes, and then we'll get 5 to opposition. Please,
Mr.
go
Chair,
ahead.
committee members, Amy Mueller, the Legally Justice Center, we do support this effort. This is about the service needs of the kids, and this is the policy committee, and the policy committee should consider the service needs first, and the money committees can consider how we pay for them. I commend the department on what they've done so far in the transformation, but a transformation needs to be ambitious. An ambitious facilities plan can't get us to the middle of the road. We need to make the effort for these kids in the same way we make the effort for kids in our K-12 schools. You know, if these were kids in foster care, we would be having a different conversation of where we are in that system now. We need to learn from those systems and apply to these kids too, who are just as worth it.
Thank you, ma'am. Please.
Again, I'm Jen Carter, the Humanization Project, and we want to also support this bill. We believe that it will help humanize the treatment of young African American youth, and believe that it's not right to take them out of their communities and put them in a place where the people that are housing them really don't understand what their life is
Thank
about.
you, ma'am. Sir.
My name is Omari El-Khadafi. I'm the director of the Richmond Food Justice Alliance. We are a program that's based on community members. They want to make change in their community. So I know some things were said about services being provided earlier, and we want to be the ones to make the change in our community because those closest to the problems are closest to the solution. And, you know, we've been participating in the governor's children's cabinet. They're like, oh, we have all these barriers to the programs and we don't know how to do it. But if you're not counting on the communities themselves to create those solutions, then you'll never come up with the solutions that really matter. So, you know, some of the stuff that she was saying, she said they're trying to move towards smaller facilities. So it sounds like the work has already been done. The fiscal work has already been done by closing down facilities. So the funds just need to be directed closer to the community so that we can.
Got it.
Take
Thank
care
you,
of
sir. This man's been waiting a long time. Go ahead, sir. Quickly, though. Don't read a whole long thing. Tell me from your heart what you think.
My name is Anthony Bell, and I'm here to support the Healthy Communities Secure Care legislation, HB 551.
All right. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. And sir, you do get the final word. Go ahead on this for supporters.
I'm the youth for Rice, the Rice Youth Club. I just wanted to say that I support the bill as well.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Could those who oppose this bill please line up? Anyone here in opposition to the Elgin Awards bill? We're going to get more discussion afterwards.
Mr. Chairman, I'm Janet Harrison with the Virginia Municipal League, and I wouldn't say that we oppose the bill because we do not oppose any of the spirit behind the bill. Our concern has to do with the funding for the local programs, the local contracts that DJJ has right now to put children back in the community, and that if they are building smaller facilities and more of them, their costs go up, and some of the money that has been used currently to help fund those local programs might disappear unless the General Assembly wants to put more funding into it, which we would hope that they would. But I just wanted to raise that as a concern about the bill.
Got it.
Thank
you, ma'am. Others who oppose this legislation? All right. I know there's still discussion around the table. Delegate Simon.
I mean, what I heard from everybody, all sides, is that we do need to disperse some of these facilities. We desperately need a new facility in Hampton Roads. I think that Delegate Ward may be able to wrestle this money in appropriations because she does have a large budget amendment that goes along with this. So I move that we report and send to appropriations.
Okay. And before we get to a motion, is there any more discussion or questions? Delegate Ward.
Mr. Chairman, just a comment. Certainly appreciate the delegates' efforts here, and you know, but from where I'm shaking out on this, I mean, I feel like this process began some years ago. We've heard the pleas. I believe the department's given it full faith effort. We're moving in that direction, and so I mean, with that, I would be voting against. the bill forward.
I would ask the department, you said, will they all be under 60 when you're done, or will there still be some that are above 60?
Ms. Slater mentioned earlier, a facility at 96, that was a recommendation of the committee, it's up to 96 in Central Virginia. But our first one is a 60 bed, up to 60 bed, in Hampton.
And where's your ultimate goal 5 years from now?
Our ultimate goal is to have Bonnier closed and all young people in smaller facilities.
How small is the department plan?
The largest one in that task force report, which was a multi-agency report, was 96. But that is flexible. We do not have funding for that as we speak.
Okay, and then since Secretary Moran's in the room, I don't know if he wants to comment on this legislation at all, on the feasibility of requiring future prisons to be 30, or if you have no position, that's fine.
Not prisons.
Excuse me, juvenile centers.
Matter.
Thank you. No, that's
I
fair
don't mean
point.
to correct
No,
you,
no,
gentlemen.
fair point.
But we really are, we're very, very proud of what DJ has been doing with this transformation. It's unfortunate that we find ourselves at, in this space where we're trying to, bring up concerns with Delegate Ward's bill, because I know Delegate Ward's heart is exactly where we are in her mission here, but the fact of the matter is, I think we can accomplish what her bill is attempting to do with a 60-bed facility using small pods. We want to create a campus-like environment. And Frank, and the other just practical concerns are, one, locating 5 facilities if we do need, 5 times 3 is 150. We've been rejected at every community we've gone to in Hampton Roads. Nobody is asking for one of these facilities, whether it's 60 or 30. So, there's just some practical problems we're having, and we're trying our best to get a small facility in Hampton Roads where a large number of these kids come from. We want them to be close to their families. We recognize the importance of that relationship and continuing to foster that relationship. So, that is the challenge. And so it's not really, we don't oppose her bill. The practical matter here is, one, obviously there's a lot of money with 5 facilities. You don't have any economy of scale, which you can accomplish with 60 or 90. Plus, codified 5 locations is just, at this point, it's not feasible.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Delegate Ward, I'm sure you will respond to some of that.
Yeah, well, one thing I do know, if you tell me that I've got a big facility coming into my neighborhood, I might be a little bit more upset than if I've got a smaller one. And that's why I think it might be easier to get them into the communities. Anybody knows me, knows I've been here 16 years. And I am not as passionate about any legislation than I am about this one. I think it's the right thing to do. I have heard everything, and what I'm hearing is we're doing the very best that we could do. And I'm just saying, step it up, maybe we can do better, and as somebody said, if you understand, this one is my Queen Esther legislature. So if I live, if I die, if I'm reelected or not, I'm coming back every year until we get what we need for those children. Because sometime we gotta put the children first. And not just what's comfortable for us.
Any more, first of all, comments or questions for the patron? All right, now we'll entertain motions.
With that passion statement after that, I move to report and refer to appropriations, Mr. Chair.
Motion made, report refer to appropriations. There a second?
Second.
All right, will the clerk please open the vote? Cast your votes. Close the roll, please. The motion's been made to report refer is successful by a vote of 4 to 3.
Won't he do it?
Thank you, Delegate Ward. All right, Delegate Freitas, I know you've been here a long time. Come on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman, I have a substitute.
All right, is there a motion to move the substitute?
So moved.
Is there a second? All in
Second.
favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, we're working with the substitute now.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Essentially what this is the problem that we're trying to solve is that when we activate Virginia National Guard in order to respond to some sort of emergency or disaster relief, they go on an incredibly low pay scale. And if you look at the overall hours that they're generally working per day, 12 to 14 hours living in austere conditions, they're making about less than $7.50 an hour. And so what we're attempting to do at this point is to allow the Department of Military Affairs within the Commonwealth of Virginia to come up with a pay scale commensurate with their service when they're pulled up on active duty and their rank. I'm very happy to say this is the first time I've ever been able to say this in 5 years. The governor has included identical language in his introduced budget. So, hey, look at that. It can't happen. But again, with that, the bottom line here is, again, this would just apply to when we call up National Guard in a new emergency situation in order to bump up their pay a little bit, in order to make sure that they're not operating at a huge deficit with respect to their regular jobs. And with that, I'd be happy to take questions from the committee.
Well, first I
There
have
it is.
a question for council, and this is just a pet peeve of mine, and has nothing to do with Delegate Freitas or this fine bill. But when you say notwithstanding any other provision of law, that always makes me nervous, because I feel like if you have two of those in code, the whole thing explodes. So, is there another provision of law that this needs to notwithstand?
So I will tell you that my understanding right now is the reason why we changed this substitute, Mr. Chairman, was to put it in line with both what the Senate version has that has already been going through right now, as well as the governor's language. So we've tried to sync everything up in order to make sure that it all coincides for easy approval.
I guess my question is, if line 11 began, when called into state active duty, is there another provision of law that somehow contradicts this, that we have to notwithstand? Does anyone know the answer to that? Yes, sir.
Sir, Russell Woodley for the Virginia Department of Military Affairs and the attorney for the
Yes.
Department for the National Guard. I know of no other law that this needs to notwithstand.
Okay, then just for a matter of drafting, the chair would entertain a motion to strike the words notwithstanding any other provision of law and to begin line 11 with when. Do I hear such a motion?
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
I would ask the patron if he's.
Would the patron be okay with that?
Mr. Chairman, I certainly don't have any issue with it. I know that again, the whole purpose of the substitute was just to make sure that we were in line with both the governor's language and the Senate's language. I certainly have no affinity for it one way or the other. I just want to make sure it goes through as easy as possible.
Because these things do get amended and all as they go along. If no one knows anything that the law is notwithstanding, I think that's a better way to do it. So, I will move that amendment. If the folks don't second, then we'll leave it in, I guess.
I second.
All right, so motion been moved and amended. All in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed say nay. All right, so we're just gonna strike notwithstanding other provision of law and begin with when called into state active duty. Are there folks here in the room that wanna come and support HB 1718? Yes, sir.
Robert Barnett. I'm a state command chief, master sergeant, retired from the Virginia Air National Guard, and a member of the JLC. I've been activated in Desert Storm and Iraqi Freedom, and I can tell you that we support this bill.
Thank you, sir. Yes, sir.
Good evening, I'm Kevin Hoffman. I'm a member of the Officers Association for the Virginia National Guard. So this came up in 2017. We sent almost 500 Virginians down to the Virgin Islands in the aftermath of Irma and Maria. And what we realized is every state and territory creates their own pay scale. So the U.S. Virgin Islands soldier or airman that worked next door to that Virginia soldier or airman got paid about twice as much. So it's a parity issue, it's a fairness issue, so I'd ask you to support it.
So, currently, let me just ask you while you're here, members of the National Guard and members of the Virginia Defense Force, it's been revised, shall receive pay allowances equal to their rank in years of service as determined by the Department of Military Affairs. Is it about half of what that is now? Will this double? Give me an idea of.
So we think it would be anywhere from 2 to 8%.
This would end up to be a 2 to 8% increase for our members.
I think so, but it would be, I can't speak to it specifically, it would be the Department of Military Affairs, what they would dictate, but I think the 2 to 8% would be.
Got it. Is there someone here from the Department of Military Affairs? Yes, sir, please. Is that right, 2 to 8%?
It's in that range, sir. Certainly, the larger increase goes to the more junior enlisted soldiers than more junior officers. Again, the more junior soldiers are truly, our typical state active duty. They're making less than minimum wage when they're working their 12-hour shifts, sometimes longer than that. So, yeah, the larger increases are there, small increases at the top level.
Anyone else speaking in favor of HB 1718? Anyone in opposition to HB 1718? Anyone from the subcommittee have any questions, comments for the patron?
Second.
All right, been a motion report and second. Open the roll, please, of the substitute with the line amendment. So I'll take a vote. All right, your bill reports 7-0. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, real quick question, Mr. Chairman, is there a
Yes.
need to show up the full committee if we report seven?
I don't believe so.
Thank you very much.
If there's any heartache, we'll let
You
you
don't
know.
wanna be here tomorrow morning.
Let you know. All right, Delegate Hope has 2 bills, Chairman and the delegate.
Let's do House Bill 1093 first. I think that's a relatively easy one. There is an amendment.
All right, is there a motion to move the amendment?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, so without objection, we'll work from the amendment.
This bill just simply requires the Department of Corrections and jails to work with the Department of Motor Vehicles to put together the necessary paperwork so that when you're in prison upon release that you can obtain a government-issued ID. Everyone knows how important it is to have an ID when you're released from prison. You can't even get a hotel room, much less rent an apartment or get a job. And so it's really important that we put these pieces together and try to capture as many people as we possibly can. The DMV has a very good relationship with the Department of Corrections. They try to be everywhere, but they can't be everywhere all the time. And there's some people that leave prison that don't have this documentation, and so what we're trying to do is try to be more efficient and make sure that people, when they leave, have access to this paperwork. There's a similar type bill, although it's much broader in scale, that's in the Courts Committee that just passed out of courts. This is much more narrow in what it does, and so they would go along nicely. So that's the bill.
Delegate Hope, there's no contradiction between this bill and the one that's going to the
No,
courts?
no.
Well, what does that one do briefly?
It requires social security cards and everything like that.
Got it.
Well, too.
All right, Delegate Wolf.
Mr. Chairman, Delegate, is there, does this card already exist, or is this?
It's not a card, it's paperwork for the card.
So
Paperwork, so that when you go to the DMV, you and I go to the DMV, you and I have to present paperwork in order to get a card.
So the
Okay,
amendment,
Mr.
Delegate Wilt says, shall assist the prisoner with all of the paperwork necessary for such prisoner to obtain a special identification card to be given the prisoner upon his release. Delegate Wilt.
Mr. Chairman, so does that card currently exist in the DMV system?
Delegate Hope.
Well, the card, yeah, DMV produces ID cards for you and me.
Mr. Chairman?
Is that what you're asking?
Well, no, I mean, that would be my driver's license, I guess, okay.
Could be, or could a special
Walker's
identification card.
Walker's ID.
So-
Yeah, it could be a Walker's ID.
Yeah, Mr.
DMV
Chairman.
already does this, yes, sir.
Go ahead, Delegate Wilt.
Yeah, that's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
I mean, I carried a bill last year to create the photoless ID, remember, for folks up home. And so, yeah, I just wondered if the cards are ever, because there was a physical impact, because DMV didn't have that style of card. They had to create one. It's pretty good. But this is already in their.
Already do it. This,
Okay,
in fact,
okay.
I did this substitute with the DMV and the
Okay,
DOC.
so Delegate Hope, if I could ask you, it says, shall upon request assist the prisoner with all the paperwork necessary for such prisoner to obtain a special identification card to be given to the prisoner upon his release. How is it special?
Well, Mr. Chairman, that's the language that they use at the Department of Corrections. You have to ask them why it's so special, but that is their language. We talked about this when we met with them, and they like that language.
Okay, so is it different from another ID card that they would issue? For someone who's not an ex-prisoner?
You know, I don't know. This is the language that they're using and what
Okay, I
they're
think
doing.
this woman may have the answer.
Do you
Is that
have an
correct?
answer?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
Linda Ford, Assistant Commissioner for Governmental Affairs for DMV. This is just simply the regular state-issued ID card. We have driver's
Got it.
licenses and ID cards.
So the
it's
prisoner-
just the code has always called it special ID, but it's for
All right.
everyone.
It's for everyone, got it.
This is not very controversial, I don't think.
All right, any other, anyone here who supports HB 1093? Yes?
I don't need to say a lot, Chairman and members of the committee, but the Humanization Project supports this wholeheartedly.
Fantastic. Anyone else supports HB 1093? Anyone oppose HB 1093? All right, Delegate Cole.
Mr. Chair, move the report.
Second.
All right.
I will just add,
Yes.
for Delegate Hope, I think the same changes that are made with the amendments passed out will probably need to be made to some additional lines just to make sure that the provisions dealing with, jails, local correctional facilities match the DOC section.
Okay, is there a motion to amend this further to incorporate, at least in principle, the technical suggestions made by council?
So moved.
Second.
All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right, there's been a motion to report with all of these amendments. And will clerk, please open the roll. All right, bill report 7-0. Delegate Hope.
All right, Mr. Chairman, you have before you House Bill 1284. And this is kind of a big bill. This is something that I've been working on for probably about 9 years now, ever since I first went down to Red Onion. The administration, to their credit, has done a very good job in trying to reduce the number of people that are in restrictive housing. You know it as solitary confinement. They've changed the name to segregation, and now it's called restrictive housing. And so what we're trying to do in the code here is follow the lead of a lot of other states that are very innovative in this area in the practice of restrictive housing or solitary confinement in Virginia. And we carve out some very broad exceptions here that would still be allowed. There certainly are circumstances when someone is a dangerous person, and you've got a lot of dangerous people in prison, or else in some cases that's the reason why they're there, and they need to be isolated from general population. You also have people that are there in prison that are maybe they're in danger themselves, and so they need to be separated from prisoners. So there needs to be some cases where we have these definitions of solitary confinement. But I strongly believe, and a lot of the national data talks about how solitary is a cruel and inhumane practice. I believe it's torture. When I went to Red Onion, I've been to Red Onion a couple of times, and certainly people on the Public Safety Committee should consider going out to Red Onion and taking a tour of the facility. It's Virginia Supermax prison. They tend to keep the worst there, especially in isolation. And you should have that experience in seeing that firsthand of what life is like. It is no day at the beach. That's why I've always been a proponent of ending the death penalty, because putting someone in that situation is far worse than giving them the death penalty, in my opinion. And so what the bill does is it brings an end to solitary in Virginia prisons and juvenile detention facilities. It also requires the Board of Corrections to take steps to end solitary in Virginia jails. And there is an amendment that I'll ask Taylor to send around at the request of the jails. We have some language in here that would send this all to the Board of Corrections and have some further make some further recommendations in the future.
Is there a motion to approve this amendment?
So moved. Second.
All right, without objection, we'll work from the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And as I said, the bill contains some limited exceptions to allow the placing of people in isolation for a limited period of time in extreme circumstances to allow the facility to determine the appropriate treatment for them.
Now, Delegate Hope, the amendment says that the Board of Corrections is going to review the standards, form a stakeholder group, determine its findings and recommendations. I guess my question for you is, what if what they find differs from what you have in your bill?
Well, Mr. Chairman, that's an enactment clause, and I think what that does is we'd say that the recommendations would come back to us, and then we would make the decision to reenact that provision of the code.
Okay, so I see. The provision of this act shall become effective July 1st, 2021.
That's correct. We do have a delayed enactment clause on the whole bill to give the Department of Corrections a chance to review its policies. I want to be very clear here. The Department of Corrections has done a tremendous job in trying to move people from solitary confinement into general population. And they have over the years, and since I've been involved in this issue, this was back during the Governor McDonald's administration, and to give credit where credit due, that's where it all started, was in his administration. And if you want to go even granular, it happened with the current director of the Department of Correction, Harold Clark. And our state has been recognized for the work that it's doing. What this bill seeks to do is finish the job. And other states have done this. Washington State, Colorado, New Jersey. Virginia is very close to being in a place where we can take that step and take a lead in this area. And I know there's a number of people here that are interested in this topic and want to speak to the bill.
But before they do, just so we understand exactly what we would be doing if we pass this bill with the amendment, is this language will be delayed for 1 year. The Board of Corrections would come with recommendations, and if we wanted to modify this language after seeing those corrections, we could do so next year. Is that correct?
Well, Mr. Chairman, that is the prerogative of the General Assembly every year. When we're in session, we can always make amendments to any bill anytime we feel like.
All right, thank you. Would those in support of the bill please tell us why you support HB 1284?
Hello, my name is David Smith. I am the chair of the Virginia Coalition on Solitary Confinement, member of the Board of Interfaith Action for Human Rights, and a solitary survivor myself. Today's my 42nd birthday. I spent my 36th and 37th birthdays in solitary confinement in Norfolk, Virginia. 16 and a half months in solitary confinement, basically in a sizable walk-in closet. This bill is necessary. The DOC has done a lot of great work, but there's still more that needs to be done. This last year, they had 3,166 people who spent over a month straight in solitary confinement in Virginia. That's just in our prison system. 7,121 people, there were 7,121 entries into solitary confinement in the state prison system last year. That's not even including what's going on in our jails. We are better than this. This bill sets the framework to allow us to create those solutions that will make our prison safer, make our guards and staff that devote their lives to corrections work safer, and make our community safer.
Thank you.
Happy birthday.
Go ahead.
Thank you.
Yeah, happy birthday.
Yes.
Good evening. My name is Vishal Agraharkar. I'm an attorney with the ACLU of Virginia. And I'm here to voice my support for House Bill 1284 on behalf of the ACLU of Virginia. We've been working for many years now on the issue of solitary confinement in Virginia prisons and jails, and have become acutely aware of, both through our research and from incarcerated people who reach out to us from around the Commonwealth, of just how many Virginians have suffered and continue to suffer as a result of the state's over-reliance on solitary confinement. We wanted to briefly touch on a few reasons why we believe it is so important that Virginia join the increasing number of states that are trying to drastically curtail their use of solitary and implement humane and effective alternatives to segregation. First, the impact of solitary confinement on mental health is well known. It can be devastating and long-lasting. Researchers have found that social isolation, sensory deprivation, and enforced idleness is a toxic combination that can lead to a range of mental health symptoms and can themselves lead to the kinds of behaviors that cause people to cycle in and out of segregation while incarcerated, and then have difficulty re-entering society and leading a normal life after release. A recent 2019 study in JAMA, the Journal of the American Medical Association, found that people who had spent any time in restrictive housing while incarcerated were significantly more likely to die of all causes in the first year after release than those who did not.
Since there are a lot of people online, I'm asking you to put down your notes and just tell me the other factors.
It won't be too long.
Okay, please.
So the bill will also improve public safety by putting prisons and jails, pushing prisons and jails in Virginia to be more rehabilitated than they are today. It reimagines segregation or isolated confinement as a setting that's used only as an emergency measure to stabilize someone who presents a threat to safety and general population, rather than being an all-purpose default way to deal with a range of behaviors, many of which are symptoms of mental health issues. The idea is once a person is admitted into isolated confinement, they should be assessed right away, and then programs and interventions should be provided to mitigate any risks that they pose, provide them with a way back to full privileged general population, and treat the needs that they have to reduce the likelihood that they cycle in and out.
Okay.
Last thing, I want to talk a bit about costs. I know fiscal impact statement was released today, just a few hours ago, and we haven't had the chance to examine that in detail yet, critically examine the assumptions that underlie it. We know from speaking with people with firsthand experience with implementing these kinds of reforms that they can yield a number of savings in the long term, and potentially in the short term as well. Savings that are not reflected in the fiscal impact.
We'll have the Department of Corrections give us, I'm sure, a full report on the costs, so, with this amendment, so I think we're good there. I do want to hear from some others that are in line, if you don't mind. I think we heard from, I know you support this. Let me hear from the woman here, please. Yes?
Chairman, Subcommittee, and thank you, Patrick Hope, for putting this bill forward. I'm Eileen Gray from Virginia Cure, and we support this. It seems to me that you get assigned, a sentence that should not also add in a severe mental health risk to people. I think in the materials I saw that a person who is not identified with mental health issues after 10 days in solitary will already start experiencing them. So I think there are some protections built in where there needs to be, but we really need to do better, and we're on a path to do better in Virginia.
Thank you, ma'am. Sir, please.
My name is Tom Petersik. I'm from North Chesterfield.
Carla Peterson, the director of Virginia Cure, was unable to be here this evening. We strongly support this legislation and are grateful for its introduction. From the perspective we bring to all the things that were mentioned earlier, I think too, that are needed to be done to support people not suffering what they're suffering now and need to be implemented. It's very
Thank you,
important.
sir.
Thank you.
Yes. Quickly, just say who you're from and whether you support the bill. And if there's something that has not been said before, I'll give you 30 seconds.
I'll keep it limited to one sentence. So I
Okay.
just wanted to say that in over time, this bill will result in fewer people being sent or kept in isolation or in costly supermax prisons. And we know that holding people in solitary costs far more in staffing and supervision than holding people in general population.
Gotcha.
So in essence, we think the bill will actually save money in the long term, and it's best for the safety of the community.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate it, sir.
I support Bill HB 1284 and believe that being able to positively interact with other human beings will better be able to allow people to adapt once they return to society.
Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, I'm Mike Edwards on behalf of the Association of Regional Jails. I want to thank Chairman Hope for his amendment at the end of the bill that sets up a stakeholder group for the Board of Corrections with stakeholders to examine the issue in jails. And I apologize, this may not be the appropriate time. I think we need a technical amendment on line 107 to pull out that language, because I think your amendment replaces the language.
All right, stay tuned on that. Stay
Yeah.
right over there. Let's just
Thank
get this, ma'am, please go ahead.
Yes, hi. My name is Ina Howman. I'm the legal director of the ACLU of Virginia. I actually wanted to quickly add that in collaboration with the Virginia Coalition on Solitary Confinement, we've actually retained an expert to help us consult on this particular legislation. His name is Dan Pacholke. He has worked with Harold Clark at the Washington State Department of Corrections for over 3 decades. But he basically analyzed the legislation and came back saying that he thought that it is not overly prescriptive. It sets direct operationally feasible mandates for the Virginia Department of Corrections, and it can be done.
Thank you very much, ma'am. Before we get to your technical amendment, does anyone oppose HB 1284? Seeing no one, sir, what is your technical amendment?
Mr. Chairman, again, we appreciate Chairman Hope's enactment language. I think respectfully we want to strike the language that begins on 107, but I think the Chairman's amendment replaces the language that begins on 107 through line 111. And I've got that here.
Mr. Chairman, I'm
Yes.
not sure that council agrees with that. Normally in the code, we need to state that the board has the authority to promulgate regulations, which is what the language on line 108 does.
Mr. Chairman, respectfully, this says that the board shall, and I think that the enactment language is intended to replace this language so that we get the stakeholder group before we make a determination. I think the language on 107 to 111 speaks only to local correctional facilities. The intent of, respectfully, the intent of the enactment language was to replace this provision so that we would have a work group of diverse parties come together and ascertain what we do a year from now.
I asked the patron if he supports this amendment. Council,
Thank
do
you.
you think it does any real
I don't-
damage?
No, yes, sir.
All right, then, is there a motion to strike, we've already added, the new, after line 187 enactment language, is there a motion to strike lines 107 to 111?
Thank you.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, so we will strike lines 107 through 111. Anyone on the subcommittee have questions for the patron or comments?
Well, Mr. Chairman, yeah, I do have a comment. One
Go
of the
ahead,
things we've
Charlie.
heard about the savings, but I think there is physical impact of like
There definitely is.
$1.6 million.
Yeah, you can't get around the Department of Planning and Budget as much as we want to, but I will tell you this, because this is not the first time we've tried to reduce the number of people in segregation. And when they did it about 5 or 6 or 7 years ago, Secretary Decker said at the time to me, she said that we were able to close units and we plowed those savings back into programming to keep people, have all these different types of nationally recognized programming to keep people out of solitary. So I do think that there will be savings. We'll take a hard look at that. So the proper motion would be to report and refer to
To report and
appropriations.
refer. All right, any more comments or questions for patrons?
Mr. Chairman.
Now I'll entertain motions.
Move to report and refer to appropriations.
As amended.
As amended.
Second.
All right, then let's open the roll. Move to report and refer to appropriations as with all those amendments that we talked about. You can. approved by a vote of 7-1. There is one bill left on the agenda. I did promise Delegate Glory that if she did not make it back in time, I would pass it by for a week. That means we will have exactly one bill next week. First, is there a motion to pass by HB 1648?
So moved.
All right, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Next week, we will have one bill. I would ask that folks get here quickly at 6. We get a quorum, we go quickly through that bill, and then all of us will, I'm sure, have places to be.
If we could move our meeting to 5:30 next week.
I would consider that. I'll talk with Delegate Chlorine if that's possible. We could even move it to another day if one is convenient, but it's been hard to find time for everyone, so. I'll see what we can do. Thank you, everyone, for very good hard work on committee. The committee is adjourned. Sorry, not that. You did. Thanks to Delegate Rasool for his work on one bill.
Yeah, for his time.